Fantastic. Kia ora all. Great to see you all here. I'm director of a locally owned and operated recruitment company, Platinum Recruitment. We're based in Dunedin, but we recruit nationally. And you might be thinking, what is a slightly oldish bald guy doing up here trying to dispense advice to you guys? I'm quite connected to the university. I've actually just finished a degree and I actually graduate on Saturday, which I'm really looking forward to. Thank you. There'll be a couple of bottles of champagne, I'm sure. But what my 7.5-year journey has given me exposure to a lot of people of your age. It's given me the opportunity to understand what you're looking for when you graduate. It's given me an understanding to mentor a number of people that have helped through the years. So although slightly older in years, hopefully the comments that I'm making are still relevant from talking and engaging with you each and every day, and also from a recruitment perspective as well.
David.
Kia ora, ko ngā tahu te iwi, ko ngā tuahuriri te hapu, ko tuahiwi te marae, ko David Takungoa. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for having me. I'm David. I'm a guy from Christchurch who ended up in Dunedin. I'm the father of 2 kids. You'll be wondering where I am because we're 25 minutes late. Thanks, Jackie.
I saw you at the museum with one of Ron's face on LinkedIn just yesterday.
And I was an Otago student. I actually had a really shit time here as a student, to be honest with you. And when I joined the university, I joined and I told myself that I would not be like some of the people that were involved in me not having such a good time here. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I have the opportunity to come and my manager calls it giving back, but I don't really feel like I'm giving much to you at all. I always come and try to engage with the student community, because I think it can be a tough world out there. It can be tough studying. And I think any advice that you can get from people that have walked that path before is good value. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And I can assure you, you are really giving back. It's wonderful to have you here and to hear from you. So first question for me is, what chances do fresh graduates have in the current job market, do you reckon?
Look, I think a better chance than you've ever had before. I think COVID has completely changed life for you, graduating and looking for that first role. We're in probably the biggest skilled and unskilled worker shortages we'll see in my lifetime, and that's just not a Dunedin or a New Zealand thing, it's a global thing. So for graduates now, the market is there for your taking, whether it's in your degree or transferring into something else. I think you've got a great opportunity, and no time is better than now or the next couple of years to be graduating and looking for that first time professional role for you.
Yeah, look, I largely agree with Dean. There's skill shortages, but as graduates, like, change takes time to take its right and to take effect. And I think you'll find that the graduate recruitment programs that are in place now have not quite managed to pivot to respond to the candidate short market that there are, that we're in. I was talking to some commerce graduates last night, and you listen to the amount of hoops that they've had to jump through from what I would describe as quite arrogant employers. Often they're big four law and accountancy firms, and they're still out there treating our graduates like they're just another number. And I think it will take time for that to change, but it's certainly changing. As upcoming graduates, my heart really goes out to you, because that change hasn't quite happened yet, but it's slowly happening. But once you've jumped through all the hoops and you're in that first role and you've kickstarted your career, you guys have really cool opportunities in front of you. So I just say tough out those graduate recruitment cycles, and put in the mahi, and it'll pay dividends.
And come and see us if you want to talk about it, because you're not on your own in that journey of jumping through those hoops. Yeah. That's what we're here for in the Career Development Centre. So what are your predictions for where the market's going? Really buoyant at the moment. Are we going to be in there for a while? Or?
Yeah, look, as said before, look, I think we're here for every time I walk into an organisation, I kind of get kicked out of the door because I'm painting a bleak pictures for companies. And the bleak picture is that it's going to be very tough to get talent on board. Business New Zealand conducted a survey a couple of months ago, and the number one concern for New Zealand organisations is attracting talent to deliver on their capability, their strategic visions and goals. So we're here I say 2 to 3 years. Most of the economists, I did a segment on Radio New Zealand with Tony Alexander, the ex-BNZ economist, a couple of months ago. He thinks we're here for 5 years. So maybe dissect that in the middle, but definitely there are going to be shortages right across the board for a long, long time.
Yeah, many of you might not realise, but you will over the course of your careers. Human resources costs are the #1 largest expense for any business, and those costs are only going up. So as there's increased competition in public and private sector for talent, the wages and salaries are growing, which is good. There's two sides to the coin though, right? Because I've got a friend, he owns a cybersecurity consultancy business, and we were talking about it, right? And he was saying, oh, it's hard to find staff. I'm going to have to pay more. And that means I'm going to have to charge more to my clients. And that's fine for him in his consultancy business because he can pass that human resources cost on. Where it's really difficult is for government sector or not-for-profit NGO organisations. If you take the university that we're in, for example, our funding envelope, so the amount of money that we get to run this place is pretty much fixed, and it doesn't increase to match inflation. So every year we're operating this place, charities are exactly the same. The cost of operating that charity is getting more and more expensive, and they have a fixed pricing, fixed funding model. So, you know, I speak to a lot of art students, a lot of them are interested in NGOs and charity type business. We heard from one lady tonight, really great. And I think there's really meaningful careers there, but the increased human resources cost is challenging for those organisations. I think we're going to be here for a while. Yeah.
Thank you. I second that. Yeah, because the salaries budget has to go up.
Yeah.
But then the university says, so what are you going to cut?
Yeah, and
We need to.
It's tough on people, right? I mean,
Right.
I remember sitting in your shoes now, and I was like, well, you know, there's all these things that I want to do. I want to travel. I want to start a family. I want to buy a house. I'm like a mad keen diver and fisher, so I wanted a boat. And I just watched like as all of that stuff started to feel like impossible for me to grasp, because of an escalating cost of living. And it's something that was apparent when I was at university throughout the global financial crisis. It's something that's even more apparent now for you guys. And so I think you combine that escalating cost of living with like escalating human resources costs for businesses. And it's like a bit of a tinderbox. It's an interesting time to be graduates looking for work. That being said though, sorry, I do think that there are still really great opportunities for you, like once you're in the door. And here at Otago, for example, like we're less interested in like what we're hiring you for right now, and we're more interested in succession planning. So where can we take you after that first role? What's the second role? What's the third role? We're trying to identify who our directors are early, so that we can wrap support around them to grow that talent.
So that brings me to another question. So if say you wanted to work for an NGO and you thought, oh, salary's a bit iffy, but I really want to work for them, there might be other things that you can negotiate. So one of the things that I speak to young students about at the moment, someone said to me the other day, the thing that's most important to me is flexibility in the workplace. So she said, right now, I like to go to the gym in the morning and then stream the lectures in the afternoon. And I'd like that same flexibility when I actually go into the workplace. And she said at the beginning of the year, I think she was applying to some of the big four. She was a BCom. She said, those companies weren't interested in giving me that flexibility. And she said, they are now. So there might be other things that you could potentially negotiate.
This has been a little bit of a pain point for me. So in my role at the university, I negotiate lots of people's salaries. I make job offers, people tell me what they want, and we negotiate, right? It's a bit of a dance. And for a long time, people have been saying to me like, oh, David, I want flexibility. And my first response is, great. You know, what does that actually look like? What does that mean? And like 9/10 of people aren't actually able to tell me like further than like a surface level, I want work to be flexible. Like when we come to the table and we say, okay, we can do that for you. What does that look like? And so my advice to you as potential new job seekers is really hone in on what flexible is for you. Just prior to this, I was looking at a data set that I've got. Seek.co.nz surveyed 5,000 New Zealanders, and they asked them what's important to you in work. And like everybody said flexibility, but the survey's cool because they actually drill down into it. understand what flexibility means to these people. I jotted a couple of them down just out of interest. So in order of preference, their like ability to work remotely, flexible working hours, time in lieu, the ability to buy annual leave, and things like on-site childcare are really of interest to New Zealanders looking for work. So hone in on what's important to you.
We're scoring pretty highly on those already.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I agree completely with David. Look, flexibility is the new currency almost when you're looking for a role. But as David said, it's really important to get an understanding when you're interviewing as to what that flexibility is, because the flexibility to the chief executive that's interviewing you, who's 55 years old, is different to a graduate coming through and saying they want flexibility. So it's really important that you get a clear understanding as to what that flexibility looks like before you sign a contract. There are companies still that believe it has to be earned, but if they're saying that, find out what that actually means. Does that mean after 3 months? Does that mean after 6 months? But really drill down on what that flexibility looks like for you. There's a number of organisations that have had to, and I hate the word pivot, and bring in flexibility, but I think one of the key things is that it's right across the organisation. So Gen Z should be entitled to as much flexibility as a working parent. So yeah, but there is some really neat stuff being done within the business community. I think David and I touched on this at a panel we had recently. I think in the public sector, I think it's easier, and for smaller organisations, they're a little bit more agile. They can make decisions quickly. So yeah, be mindful of that when you're looking for those flexible options as well.
And I guess it's like any interview question, isn't it? If you're a bit vague on what you're asking for and you don't know, you'll sound like a vague person. So drill down with, what your thoughts are before you get in there. Right, I am going to get into the nitty-gritty of good applications in a minute, but I've got some other questions I really want to ask first, so just bear with me. The borders are open. People have been talking about wanting to go overseas for ages. And I know employers are really concerned about the fact that some of the people that had started jobs through the pandemic are going to up and go. This is one of the issues. What about if, say, someone sitting in this room who's going to graduate says, I actually want to do my OE. It used to be the rite of passage and it stopped. So what if somebody decides they want to go overseas first before they settle down?
I think the grass is always greener. So it might not be, just be prepared for it to not be as great as you expect, particularly if you're looking to relocate permanently. But further to that, I think New Zealand's such a village, right? We're all scattered right throughout the world. There's Kiwis in every far-flung portion of the world. If you are going to go and travel, and particularly if you want to relocate, try and network with some people over there. If you can connect with one of the people that we met tonight, and they're going to be in Melbourne, or they're going to be in Frankfurt or in Berlin or any of these countries, it helps build a really great support network for you. What we find with a lot of Kiwis traveling overseas, lots of people underestimate the power of homesickness. And it sounds like a childish thing that we all deal with, right? You're like, oh, I'm on school camp, I'm homesick. But it's 100% something as adults when we travel away from home for an extended period of time, we get homesick, and those networks can really help make your relocation stick.
Yeah, I've got one thing to say. Please don't go. Look, we're seeing a huge exodus of young people out of New Zealand. I think NB released some figures the other day. I haven't downloaded those figures yet because I'm scared to see what they look like. We will have negative net migration for the next foreseeable future as young people are looking at options offshore. But, as David highlighted, really do your due diligence. We have a whole heap of people working for American companies right here in Dunedin. Remote working works the other way as well. So just look at your options before you make a decision to get on a plane. And look, sometimes doing a couple of years in New Zealand and getting that experience and then taking that overseas is a really valuable experience as well. So yeah, but it's a tough decision for you to make. Do I stay or do I go? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Yeah,
I think as well, when you're searching for a job, it's one of the only times in your life where society will accept the fact that you're being selfish. Be super selfish when you look for work. super selfish. And you know what, rather controversially, if like Australia is going to pay you twice as much for the job that you can do here in New Zealand, go do it. Like, you're young people, be selfish, you know, go make your money, go have your experiences. New Zealand will always be here. You know, we'll always have the gates open. We'll keep the lights on. The university will be here. We're 150
We'll have you
years
back
old, you know.
onto a postgrad course.
Go live your lives, have your experiences, and be selfish. But make sure there are support networks there for you as well.
So on that note, just to butt in, I can never just have it you two, could I? LinkedIn alumni, really good thing to look at, because you can actually have a look at students who have graduated, who are living all over the world. You can link with them. So you can search for your degree, whatever country you want to go to, and you can find Otago students all over the world. And the other thing I was going to say, some of the larger companies, the global ones, I mean, you could potentially get a job with them and be transferred. And there's also companies nowadays that thinking, look, okay, you've had a couple of years with us, go and do your OE, but we'll keep the door open for you, because they don't necessarily want to lose you for good because of the problems that we've outlined already. So now on to the nitty-gritty of good job application. So what are the key attributes you think employers are looking for when hiring graduates? I can see the flaw in that question already, because it depends which job you're actually applying for. So and what are the specific qualities you think BA graduates particularly bring to the table? That's perhaps a little bit easier to hone in on rather than the first part of the question.
Well, maybe I'll go for the first part if that's harder. I suppose for us and the team, you know, I think recruitment has almost moved away from a technical based recruitment model. So the skills, the hard skills that you've got, and it's moved to a fit-based recruitment model. So we're looking for those soft skills. Well, and you know, use all the buzzwords in the world that are going to come out. So I apologise for that. But we're looking for, you know, resilience, adaptability, people that have emotional intelligence. So somebody that's been able in an entrepreneurial program, somebody that's had a part-time job at McDonald's, somebody that volunteered for the Otago hospice shop, things that have put them outside of their comfort zone and got them to interact with a different generation, and the skills that they build through those soft skills are really, really valuable. And we have a number of employers that are demanding those skill sets. Yeah.
I think when I'm hiring grads, like, we really want to hire people that we kind of vibe with, that we have good values matches with. You know, for me in the university, the values of like manaakitanga, whakawhanaungatanga, like, really important. If you come into an interview and you demonstrate those values to us, like, we're interested, you know, then those, I mean, that's like, sorry, those values are basically like respect, and, you know, have every interaction, both parties leave with the mana that they came into it, and whakawhanaungatanga community, really important. The university as well, like, we really value curiosity, and I particularly like people with an entrepreneurial skill set. We're a big organization, so I've had people say, like, well, why is being an entrepreneur useful in a big organization? Those people can quite frankly go away. Like, entrepreneurship is important in any organization. It doesn't matter the size. There'll always be the opportunity to start things, even if you're 5,000 staff and 20,000 students.
I think the other thing, Jackie, just at the end there is, you know, I did the commerce internship program yesterday with some mock interviews, and I don't know, I think it was 3 or 4 accountants. They were looking for a career path, and I had this one young man that was just passionate about numbers. You know, you could see his passion about accountancy before he even sat down. So you mentioned curiosity, you know, but that passion, you know, and I think most of the speakers have mentioned that word passion, you know, really try and get that across to someone that's interviewing you and bring that to the table, because if you can be seen to be passionate, you're 9/10 of the way there, I think.
I think authenticity as well, like, be your best selves and be yourselves when you come in. Like, the worst thing you can do is pretend to be someone else, get a job with a company, and then you're stuck being that person for as long as you work for that company. Otherwise, you have to turn around and be like, oh, sorry, mate, I lied in the interview. You know, so you kind of railroad yourself into being someone that you're not. I think authenticity is really important. And yeah, try demonstrate it in your interviews, but in your CVs and cover letters, look through like the summary and opening statements that you make, and just think really hard, like, am I describing my authentic self? You know, in my office, I've got 50 CVs that describe themselves as enthusiastic, hardworking team players. And dude, like that's all of us, right? Like I don't think that many of us would describe ourselves as something other than that. And so how genuine is that? If it describes everyone, does it really describe you? Yeah, so I think be your best selves.
Sometimes I ask, sometimes it's good to ask someone else, have I really described myself? Because I say the same thing on the rare occasion I get to these students now. That sounds like everybody probably in your class. So they're hard to write. But again, that's what we're here for. Because we've got lots of information to help you get your CV to a really good stage before you let us maybe have the final check over if you want us to do that. So I've got one more question, so I'm going to hand over to you in a minute. So we'll get your questions ready. What would be good questions for our audience to actually ask at a job interview when they turn it over to the recruiters and say, right, I've got questions for you now? What are good questions?
Dino?
Yeah, look, I think the market's changed dramatically. You know, it used to be a candidate selling to a client to get a role. It's almost done a complete flip. The client needs to be selling to a candidate because we're in a talent short market. So never be afraid to ask challenging questions in an interview. We talk about due diligence all the time, but if you're looking for an organisation, find out what their values are, what charities they support. Do a bit of research on them and ask some really difficult questions, because that's really going to show a level of intent. And if you can put a client under the pump in a respectful way, that's going to put you apart from probably 95% of the other people that are interviewing for the role. So never be afraid in this market to ask questions when you're in an interview, as long as they're done in a respectful manner. I've yet to see a client come out of an interview and say, well, why did they do that? You know, the market's changed completely. And I suppose one of our biggest challenges as a recruitment company is challenging our older, more established organisations that the market has changed. So you are going to be put under the pump. So you've got to know about your own company as well. So yeah, that would be my piece of advice.
And asking those questions can kind of clarify a bit of that cultural fit, can't it?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the hardest things. Have you thought about this? I know when an employer says, find out of our culture and see how you fit into it. Sometimes it's really difficult to actually find out that culture. People look a bit similar, and what you read on the website sometimes looks a bit similar. So these kind of questions.
I mean, sometimes that company culture directly repels us as well.
Yeah.
You know, on the topic of kind of being your authentic selves, like if you're tangata titiriti, so like people of the treaty, or you're tangata whenua and you value like treaty partnership, then ask about it. You know, like I sat in one, when I was a consultant, I used to work for Dean's company. I sat with one of my clients and they said, oh, you know, we're a treaty-led organisation. And I was like, how? Because nothing around me that I see indicates that. So like, what are you doing to advance your goals in this space? Like, if that's important to you, ask. If they say like, I had this recently, right? So like the university says that we value community. And I just had one young candidate said to me, oh, look, I see that you value community. How does that play out at the university? What does that look like? What does that actually mean? Or are they just words on a page? They didn't say the last bit, but it was implied, you know. And I think, you know, you're all bright people. Like, you should have the opportunity to work for people that have like a really close values match with you guys. And so take the steps. They're brave steps, particularly in the position that you're at now. I recognize there's a massive power imbalance between yourselves that are graduates with either little experience, no jobs, probably still flatting, you know, like it's tough. I used to eat meagering every night, like I remember, you know, and so there's a big power imbalance. So have the brave conversation, take the brave step and ask the questions that will indicate who's going to be a good values match for you. It's so important, honestly.
And if you ask them and they think, maybe not, it's not a good match anyway, to be honest. I've worked for one organisation where my values didn't fit. And it was a long couple of years until I worked out how I could escape. And it was a good learning curve for me, that one. Make sure you don't do that again.
Look, I was much the same. I was desperate. I took a job with Philip Morris, their tobacco company. And I was selling cigarettes for a while, and it was really interesting because on the Māori side of my family, I've got 2 aunties that have had emphysema, and it's all from smoking, 100% from smoking. And every day I was going into the office, I was driving my car around selling cigarettes to dairies, trying to reconcile this with myself, and it got me into a really dark place. And then I was like, you know what, I'm better than that. You know, rise above it, and I want to find an organisation that I'm a close values match with. Don't make the mistake of taking any job. You can hold out for one that is a good fit for you. But kind of on that topic, if I may, one of the other things I wanted to share with you today, I work in recruitment, but like I didn't finish university, I didn't finish school and be like, God, I want to be the best damn recruitment consultant there is, you know, like, yeah, not at all. Some of the worst careers advice that I've ever had was find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I followed that advice for so long, and I hated every moment. I got rejected, I couldn't make a career out of the stuff I love. Admittedly, the stuff I love is lame, right? Like I like puzzles and chess, you know. So I was never going to make $1 million doing puzzles. But I think the advice I'd give you is find a job that gives you space to be the best person you can at that job, like to be really good at that job, and you will find things that you love about that job, like they will come. There are days that I go into work and I'm like, oh God, what am I doing here? And there isn't every job, like honestly, and I've done enough of them, like there's those moments in every job, but if you're good at your job, you'll find stuff that you love 100%, and particularly with your BAs. Like you might be doing a history major, you might not get a job as a historian, but that doesn't mean that whatever cool job you get, you won't find an element that you love about it. And I really couldn't stress that enough. Like that's what I'd love to impart to you tonight. Yeah.
And that's such good advice, because I'm a bit old actually now, and I've had lots of jobs and there's been delight in all of them, mostly apart from that one I told you about before, where my values were just offended every day. But we don't all know what we're going to do. And if you're sitting here thinking, Flip, I've got no idea what I'm going to do. I started out thinking I was going to be the best retail manager that the UK ever had, and I didn't even get a job in that. Then I trained to be a teacher, and I wasn't rubbish at it. I didn't like it, so I never did it. I just finished and said no thanks. Got offered a job, and I thought I can't do this, so I walked away from that. Then I went into a bank because my dad said it's going to be secure. That do the banking. I escaped from there, and finally I decided I'd be a careers advisor. And whilst I work, I love my job. You know that business about, I know I have to work, but I do love everything about a careers role. But it took a heck of a lot of, I used to say you have to kiss a few frogs before you find your prince, because I had to kiss quite a few in banking and before I found the fact that career guidance was the thing that just makes me smile. And it's still making me smile today. I think hopefully you can tell that. But sometimes you just, the things you do are just stepping stones, really. Anyway, I haven't got any more questions because I was hoping that some would come from you. So please, I have got plants in the audience if nobody asks anything else, but were there any more on there that I've not picked?
The only thing that I was just going to chime in with, and if you haven't picked up on it already, you probably should have, but LinkedIn, I'm incredibly passionate about LinkedIn. It's a gateway to a career. It's a gateway to connection, collaboration, and it was started as a CV site effectively so that employers could pluck you out. It's so much more than that. It's a social network. It's a professional network. So if you haven't got a LinkedIn profile, and Jackie, the resources you were talking about, go on and have a look at David and my profile, have a look at what it looks like, but make it your own. But yeah, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, all employers, prospective employers, will get your CV, and the first thing they'll do is they'll go to LinkedIn and look at your LinkedIn profile. And I know clients will go, oh, why don't they have LinkedIn profile? So and then there's a psychology behind that, but yeah, have a LinkedIn profile and really craft it so that it's a reflection of your true self as well.
And you might be contacted by an employer. I have been contacted by employers with perfectly reasonable jobs that I could do if I were interested in leaving the university. So sometimes it does lead to people. You'll do a search of LinkedIn sometimes, won't you?
Oh, yeah, look, we're effectively a search and selection company now. We operate solely off LinkedIn.
So again, you're getting such a lot of plugs. Weekly workshops apart from the next 2 weeks.
I think like, I won't sugarcoat it. I think the hardest job search that you're probably ever going to do is about to come when you graduate. It will get easier though, and you'll probably, like, honestly, before I did this, I must have had like 8 jobs, and I love what I do now. I really do. And I like some of the stuff that I did before, but like our careers, they're a process, and they're a bit of it's cliche, but they're a bit of a journey. Don't be afraid starting that journey in a place that's not where you want to finish it. That's not to say take any job, like, you know, you'll have money, you'll have power, you're all strong people, I'm sure, like hold out for the job that you want, but don't be afraid if it's not kind of the end destination, would be my advice. Yeah. And be cool people, other than that.
Already on.
Yeah, more cool.
Have we got any questions from the audience?
Must have done a great job, David.
That's it.
Yeah, it's done a great job. Yeah, you answered everything.
Can I ask this question?
Yeah.
And thank you for the link and title, maybe.
Gonna be busy.
Around CVs and cover letters, actually, which are, you know, the bane of everyone's life, really. And they're hard to write, and you talk about those personal profile statements, which is so hard to write, and cover letters, and how to make them effective. So a little while ago, pre-COVID, we did a bit of informal research with employers that we were in contact with, and just, you know, do they read cover letters? Do they read CVs? Where do they put the weight? Where do they put the value? I remember a graduate recruiter from one of the big 4 said, oh, I only read one cover letter and 100 or 400 or something ridiculous, but they still ask for them, which is, you know, all the time everyone puts them.
That guy sounds like a dick.
Pardon?
That guy sounds like a dick, right? Like if you're going to ask someone to write something,
Exactly.
you read it. Yeah.
Not disagree. So, do you see some trends in that? You know, somewhere a few years ago, I read that maybe CVs and cover letters will eventually disappear, and all applications will all be through LinkedIn. So I guess it's a wee bit of a 2-part question. Where do you think CV cover letters sit in terms of recruiters, HR employers looking at them at the moment, and do you see any changes happening?
Yeah, sure.
Plugging on in the
I
same
think
way?
as you all advance through your careers, the importance or weight of the cover letter will start to diminish, as some of your motivations and some of the kind of decisions that have gone into making up your experience will become like quite obvious. While your early career though, that cover letter is really useful for us as employers to help identify what your motivations are. And also with a lot of graduates, when we're interviewing them, we'll have a question like, can you tell us about any leadership experience that you've got? And a lot of people go, oh, well, I don't have any. And so often we'll push back on that, because like there'll be group projects where you've had a leadership role, or maybe you've been like part of governance in a club or a society here, like maybe you're like treasurer for your football team, or, you know, there's all sorts of different types of leadership, and the cover letter can help to bring some of that out. It lets you talk a little bit more free form about it. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I agree completely. I think for certain roles and for later in your career, like for example, if we've got a role we're going for, we might go onto LinkedIn and pull out 20 candidates. We don't need a CV or a cover letter from those candidates because we've reached out to them. But certainly at the beginning of your career, you definitely need that. A cover letter is a great way to add on to those skills, hard and soft, that you've got, and a great way to demonstrate your values. And again, this comment's fraught with danger, to be fair, but this is from what I see from my clients. If my clients don't ask for a cover letter, they won't read it. So if you're applying for a role and it doesn't ask for a cover letter, I know the clients that I've got, if they don't ask one, they won't read it, even if it's attached most of the time. So I've always said that I don't think there's any harm in attaching a cover letter. You can't control the audience if they choose to read it or not. So I think it's another avenue to add to that skills.
With a lot of the hiring managers I'm working with, I'm trying to teach them a little bit about, like, we don't hire a person, we hire like an entire whānau, and we hire like everything that's happened before that very day that they walk in on their first day. And the cover letter can really help to tell some of the story that kind of led to us meeting in that interview, or us meeting over that table when I'm reading your CV. And I think that can be quite powerful. So I give another presentation to some students where it's like full of Marvel and comic book references, but it's basically about, which I won't go into, but it's basically about crafting your origin story. Like you're all superheroes, and every superhero has to have an origin story. It's not a lie, but it's a compelling story about what brought you to this point, and the cover letter is key in that. Yeah.
There's a question down the back there.
Yes, yeah.
My question was just in terms of like the classic question of where would you see your career in 5 years, or like what's your ambitions? Are there particular things that employers look for, or like things to stay away from?
Oh God, it's it's difficult because I hear like you might give the same answer to 10 different people, and I'll hear like 10 different reactions to that response. I would say I had one most recently. A lady was applying to a marketing agency, and they asked her, what do you want to do in 5 years? And she said, I want to run my own marketing agency. And that was an interesting choice for her, because she's basically saying, I'm going to compete with you once you teach me how to do it. And they felt, I don't agree with the way that they felt, but they felt threatened. And it wasn't, I'm sure that wasn't that lady's intention, but that's how it came across. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, look, it's a really tough question, and I suppose it becomes tough because you don't know the audience. You can sometimes do a bit of research on who's interviewing you. So, for example, if you got interviewed by me, you'd think, right, old guy, he's going to have some old-fashioned values there, so I'll answer it a particular way. If you're being interviewed for a tech company and you're being interviewed by a 28-year-old, 29-year-old, they probably are expecting a different answer. So do your research on the company and make some assumptions as to what they want to hear. And sometimes you do have to be a wee bit broad. So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? I would never suggest you say, well, still with this company. But what I'd say is, look, this is a great opportunity. I want to learn and develop and grow. I see that you're a large size company. I'd love to be in maybe a different department, learning new skills, but I just want to continually grow and develop in the environment that I'm in. Have you answered the question? Yeah, I think you have, but without actually putting a specific time frame on it. So being a wee bit vague or a little bit broad is completely okay.
Or you know what, dude, like they didn't actually really ask you like about what job do you want to have for 5 years, and it sounds like that's kind of the lens that you're putting on it. You could turn around and say like, well, look, in my personal life in the next 5 years, I hope to purchase a house. I hope to. You can talk about some of your personal goals, but on the topic of like answering questions and being authentic, like if someone were to ask me that question, like I genuinely don't know. Like I have no idea. And particularly at your point in your career, I wouldn't be afraid to say I don't know. I'm open to anything. We just say like I want an adventure. It's a really tough question. It's also a bit of a dick question to ask people at the point in your career. But I don't know. You probably don't know what you're doing in 5 years. Like who actually does, right? Like so much changes in 5 years. You shouldn't have to have all the answers.
And things come up, don't they? And then so many people say to me, gosh, this opportunity came up and I grasped it. I never even imagined. I mean, here we are sitting as careers advisors saying, let's plan your career. Actually, careers are a bit more like crazy paving than a straight pathway. So in reality, it's a daft question.
Yeah. You can focus on personal goals if you have any. Like, and I wouldn't be worried if you don't have any personal goals. I don't have any personal goals. It's not uncommon,
And we have seen, and for us, it's about educating our clients as well. And not every interview you walk into would be like this. So, I agree with David. It's not a great question. It's an awful question. We encourage our clients not to ask it. A better one is, what do you want to achieve in the first year if you're successful in the role? There are so many better questions you can ask in an interview as an organisation. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 15 years, so I'll be retired. But, there are other questions that are more progressive questions in interviews that hopefully you will be being asked, as opposed to the old stale questions as well.
That's a good question though.
And like, don't be afraid to turn questions around either. You could say something like, well, look, I don't really have any clear plans, but I'd be interested. Where could this company take me in 5 years? And you watch, that person's going to go, because they're just not expecting it. But that'd be a very fair question for you to ask me if I asked it to you. And hopefully in doing that, they can paint like a bit of a path for you,
Has anyone else got any?
An example for one of the more progressive questions.
Oh, you look, I like the question on I like the interviews being honed completely to the candidate. So, and again, I go back to that. It's about the client selling to you. So the client should be, where do you see yourself in a year's time? Well, the candidate will answer. And then the client's going to come back, well, we've got this, we've got that. How does that sound to you? I really like the client selling to the candidates, and that can take the conversation off in a million different directions, but I really like interviews being steered that way, and most of the organisations that we deal with are adapting to that. Even the older organisations that have been Dunedin for 150 years, like the university, are changing the way they interview. They're changing the way they engage with people. So I suppose be prepared for those progressive questions, but also for the older style questions as well, because you might get those with different line managers or whatever it might be. So yeah.
I hire for a university, right? So I always like hearing the questions that focus in on like how people might address some of the cultural inequities involved in education with some of our more marginalized communities accessing that education. I think it's always an interesting topic because you can watch people from a certain kind of cohort just like not be able to engage with the subject at all, right? They're like, well, everybody's got equal opportunity to education. And then you see like a kind of more educated cohort of people that can actually kind of tackle the subject head on and have some really good ideas about how we can increase like Māori and Pacifica participation in tertiary education. There's things like that that we come up with, the Pacific Island Centre, the Māori Centre, some really good initiatives, scholarships and things. And so I just think it's cool because they are big problems. And in an interview, you get like a little bit of insight into how some really smart people might, recognise that problem and start to like unpick it.
Thank you.
So has anyone got any other questions? It could be your nightmare interview question you could get some advice on. How about you?
I just wanted to ask about recorded interviews. Lately, all of the companies that I've been applying for haven't given me the opportunity yet to meet with someone. So I just wanted to know if you guys have any tips to stand out in the video recorded interviews.
Yes, you're getting like one-way video interviews?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So I led a project 3 years ago to introduce one-way video interviewing here on campus. I was dead against it as well. I was worried it would unfairly disadvantage like introverted people, people with accessibility issues. I wasn't quite sure how to get through that, and as a result, we had a platform, we tried it out. I wasn't entirely happy with the results. We went looking for a product that has a few more equity things in it. So now we can like blank people's faces. They talk with like a Siri voice. So there's a transcript, so you can't actually hear people talk. And we've seen our the kind of diversity of hires through that tool increase, which has been really cool. You probably don't have the luxury to say, hey, mate, do you mind not using this tool? It doesn't have the equity things that I'm looking for. I just remember that you generally get multiple takes. Pay attention to the background that you're in. Like I've seen countless of them. People have like a messy bed behind them. There's like dishes and things packed up. And honestly, I don't care. But like the managers that I'm sitting with, they'll say things like, oh, it didn't even make the bed. Like, oh, so those things are, they're easy for you to control, and just pay attention to like the shot, maybe the noise around you. And then like at the end of the day, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, like more power to you, select out of the process, go find someone that's got time to meet you. I appreciate that's a privileged thing for me to say, like in my role for the university, but I do really mean it. And if you take the time to find a role with someone that's actually going to engage with you on the level, like you'll be so much happier working for them.
Yeah.
We've got a tool that you can use, on my career space I was talking about it before, we have got a place where you can practice doing those sort of things also. Yeah. So
if you're doing it while you're here on campus, use some of the resources available to you. Like you can go to the Careers Development Centre, you can go to our e-conferencing centre, we've got like, you know, $10,000 cameras and things, and you can do some of these. You got to book the time, and it's got to work in around everybody else's schedules. But hell, even like after this, send me a message, come do it in my office. Like find a space that's going to be like nice and professional and sell you. But yeah, they're tough.
Yeah, I agree with David. I don't like them. I don't think it's a level playing field at all. So many biases that get brought into it. If you've had a couple that haven't worked, go back to the next one that you do. If you're not successful, go back to the organisation and say, look, I've done a couple of these, and show your vulnerable side. You know, so I've done a couple of these. I'm not getting past that next step. Could you maybe tell me what your opinion is, or why I didn't get to that next level? I've yet to see a client turn around and say, I can't give that feedback. Sorry, it can't do it. So ask questions, and that's for any application that you turn down. Go back to the organisation and really show some interest, and you're trying to be better next time, or maybe do something a little bit different, whilst also being genuine and authentic to your true self. But getting that information is really critical moving forward if you are getting knockbacks. And I suppose that's, the resilient card comes out. Dave's right, this is going to be the toughest role that you probably ever apply for. There's no way of sugarcoating that. And although I said, contradicting myself slightly, because the market, it's there for the taking, but there'll still be a lot of rejection. There'll still be a lot of no's, and for jobs that you really, really want. But drill down on them. Don't be afraid to ring the hiring managers or HR and ask some questions. They may even meet you and cover that off. I know where that's happened as well. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Any more questions? Joe, were you about to say something? No? Just stretching. I'm on the lookout for anyone in my team that might ask a question, you think? No,
It's like an
Well, I
option.
can ask
Don't move.
one.
Yeah, does anyone have a question burning at the moment? Lindsay?
So my favourite question that I hate being asked in an interview, I hate the fact that students I work with might be asked in an interview is, what is your greatest weakness? I hate this word weakness. And one of the things that I talk about is, shifting the language, talking about challenges, but about stepping away from that. So I'm just wondering, are you still seeing people using that? And any other tips that you might have?
Yeah, so in terms of like HR and interviewing theory, we've moved on a little from like a standard interview question like, what is your greatest weakness? You'll still find it, but typically, particularly in an organization that's got like a big HR department like us, you'll find a group of people that will design what we call behavioral interview questions. And so they'll be familiar to you because they'll go like, Jackie, tell me about a time at work that you were feeling vulnerable, or tell me about a time, or provide me with an example of a time you failed to deliver on a project. And so they're all focused on previous examples from your career or from your experience. And when I've met with graduates and potential new graduates, this is something they've really struggled to not understand, but to succeed with, because they don't feel like if I say to you, like, tell me about a project that you weren't happy with. And most people's mind goes to work. They go, oh God, I don't know. I work at the Rob Roy or something. Like, it's not like I get involved in a lot of project work. Throw the work example out, and think about your experience here studying. And there will be countless examples. I know there was from my group projects. If I can abolish one thing while I work here at Otago, it's group projects, honestly. And the amount of times I've wanted to get like an A on an assignment, and we've all caught up in the group, and I'm like, oh, what do you want to get? Oh, B would be fine. I'm like, mate, as long as I pass, I'm cool. And we end up getting like a result that I'm not happy with. That's actually quite a powerful example, because the interviewer is going to have like a number of follow-up questions for you. Like, what was the outcome? What did you do to contribute to the success of that project? And, in that example, then it's like, well, I met with the person that was just happy to get a C. And I was like, well, how do we increase your, so there'll be lots of examples from your study that you can draw on. What I wouldn't do is be like, oh, well, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, sometimes I'm too early for work, you hear them, honestly, don't you? Like, go, well, you know, maybe just I'm a little too good looking. And you're like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, that's not genuine. It's not authentic. And people see right through it. Like you'll say it, and so have the last 10 people that have sat in that seat. So be yourselves, because you're the only version of yourselves.
Yeah, I agree with David. Look, the narrative is changing in terms of what people are asking. So now we see, you know, that question was crafted, I think, in the 1950s.
Yes.
You know, we're now seeing what's been one of your greatest challenges in the last sort of year or whatever it might be. And I think for the audience here, you've got a great opportunity. And the obvious one that springs to mind is COVID. You know, you've been through a time which has been really challenging, but then you turn that into a positive. So there's a real great opportunity in a question like that to completely flip that on its head. And come out with some real positive as well. But I absolutely agree that narrative is changing and people aren't, well, they should, if they're asking those questions, you're probably going to come out of that interview thinking, I'm maybe not so sure this is the place for me. Because yeah, that probably bodes to the organisation as well.
Throw them an answer like, I'm really bad at identifying my key weaknesses and see what happens. You know, it'd be quite funny. But yeah, I don't think you'll encounter that problem a lot, or that question a lot. Hopefully.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. If you have really if you have a major gap in your CV, is there anything that you can do to deal with that the obvious weakness?
Yep. Look, for me, if you've got a gap in your skill set, your CV, whatever it might be, voluntary work. Voluntary work is a great way to fill that skills gap that you've got. And that's pretty simple for me. If you don't have a part-time job or you can't get a part-time job, whatever it might be, do voluntary work. It fills those skills gaps that you've got, B, it bodes to the traits that you have, and it shows a willingness to give back. I'm a massive advocate for voluntary work for young people, for everyone, in fact. And if you don't have any level of voluntary work on your CV, you might actually get asked why not in an interview. I'm a really big advocate for it.
There's probably going to be a reason for a gap in your CV. Don't be afraid of that reason. Like, unless you were just like sitting at home straight chilling for 2 years or something, you know, like I had a question early in my career when I was studying, I got meningitis, I got really sick. I'd take 18 months off and I could like barely get out of bed, like almost died. And I one employer who will remain nameless basically be like, what did you do for 18 months? And I was like, well, God, like, if you must know, like I was deathly ill, you know, like what do you want me to do? But I ended up talking to him about how I think that experience has made me quite resilient, and it's made me appreciate like what I have, my family, you know, my occupation, etc., etc. There'll be a reason why you've got a gap in your CV, and it's not a bad thing. So with the employment market the way that it's been in the last 2 years, there's like a really great target market of or target employee, which a lot of big organizations are starting to target, and that's returning mothers. And so we've been doing a lot of thinking about how we can best advertise and attract returning mothers, and like stopping that sort of thinking in our hiring managers is one of the most important things that we do, because it's none of your business what they've been doing for the last 18 months, mate. Like I'm the husband of a wonderful wife, 2 kids under 2, and mate, like honestly, she does more work in a day than I do in a week, you know. And I've met some incredible mothers, and they've said to us, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I've got this gap, you know. And it's really interesting, you know. I met one, she was not quite CEO, like a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and she was trying to come back after a 3 or 4 year gap in her career and take like an accounts clerk position, which is like fairly entry level. And I remember being like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, you didn't forget everything that led you to becoming a CFO of a massive organization in the 3 years that you were out having children. And I think you'll find as we upskill hiring managers, you'll get less and less of these questions come out, because quite frankly, it's probably none of their business. Yeah.
And if you feel worried about answering those sort of questions, again, come and practice with us. We can do that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's lots of things that you learn while you're not working. You know, like maybe you've been traveling. Or maybe you've just been helping out on the marae with the cousins, you know, like there's so many skills that you learn doing that, many of which are like entirely applicable in a work setting.
Like I said before, nothing's ever wasted, is it?
No.
Never. Yeah. So, let's have a look. It's 20 to 8. So have we got any more questions? I know you need to get home to your family. Oh, there is one at the back there.
I want to ask about what the appropriate point in the application when still work is to communicate if you have like a disability or not necessarily a disability, but something that will limit your, maybe not call that not limit, but that exists in your life as a limitation that has the potentiality to affect the role, but probably won't overall.
Yeah, right on. Kia ora for the question as well. So the question is basically like, at what point do we think it's appropriate to communicate an accessibility or like an issue that you think might affect your employment moving forward? Yeah, that's a tough one. I can speak for like a big organization like this. The hiring manager reviewing applications is not normally privy to your accessibility information, so it's firewalled, it's kept separate. The theory being that we want, if Jackie's hiring for her team, we want her to hire the best damn careers advisor, regardless of their personal situation, and we, the university, will support that person. So if they're the best person, then damn it, like we'll support them. We had a recent example, we hired a new administrator. She's absolutely fantastic and she's got an accessibility issue. She's in a wheelchair, and we moved heaven and earth and a staircase to accommodate her into the building. And that's what a good employer should be doing. But maybe Dean can answer from like a SME sort of perspective.
Great question. Really good question, and difficult one to answer. I suppose from a robust process, from a recruitment agency point of view, we've got questions within our application forms. Is there anything that you would like to disclose that might impede your ability to undertake the role? So then you've got a decision to make. Do you fill that out on the role or not? For me, that's an ethical question, whether you want to do that or not. Then we have a conversation with the client. So we would meet with you, would discuss what that looks like, and then we would discuss that with the client and have a robust discussion. But as David says, we've moved heaven and earth with clients to make things work. And a progressive organisation that's inclusive and diverse will make that work. There are some clients that won't. And that's the reality. We still have some of those within our environment, but yeah, I would like to think on the whole that people are changing, and yeah, as you said, move heaven and earth to make it happen, because there's so much value in that.
The really difficult stuff is when we do things like work tests. So I had this relatively recently with a lady that was visually impaired, and she was adamant that she could do the job in this particular business unit, and we were like, okay, well, let's have a go and see what happens. And it was heartbreaking for her, because I watched as it became obvious to her that she couldn't do the role. It was a lot to do with masks, and she was really reliant on lip reading. But if you're in that situation, I would just have a clear idea about your requirements. Like, what do you need to be the best person you can be in that job? Because that's what we're going to be wanting to understand. So like, what do we need to support you? And if you can like clearly articulate, look, I need boom, 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 you know, we can start to understand, you know, can we actually accommodate this, or is, unfortunately, in the case of the lady with the mask, like, is this just not going to be possible?
But there might have been other. It sounds like the university would actually try and suggest some other options.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I used to do in my past life for my sins, I used to work for Workbridge. And because I've been out of that environment for a while now, I don't know whether it's still the same as it used to be, but there was a possibility of Workbridge coming up with something called supported funds for smaller employers. That meant if there was any workplace adaptations that needed to happen, money was often available, so it wasn't coming out of the employer's pocket. So if it's still there, you know, with things like that. And Workbridge are also coming onto campus, and they're sometimes quite good at running disclosure workshops, where probably perhaps a little bit better than the careers team are, in terms of talking about some of that Mind you, I'm not bad at it. Actually, we're not bad at it at all. But
I
just in
think,
terms of thinking about how you might phrase things.
I think as well, like in that scenario, and for all of you, even if you don't experience like accessibility issues, don't be afraid of the phone. Don't be afraid to like reach out to the hiring manager. So if you make that disclosure, consider following up with that person. Maybe it's me, and you go, "Hey, David, look, I've just applied for this role. I just want to let you know I've got this accessibility. This is how I think we can mitigate it. And I just wanted you to know that I'm really keen on the role." And that way, if you're on the phone with them or you're having correspondence with them, you'll really quickly work out, like, is that person on the level? Is that person going to respect me for me? Or are they just going to see like an accessibility issue, like a problem? You know, and if they see a problem, dude, that's not someone you want to work
No.
for, right?
But I'm so impressed when somebody rings me and talks to me before I
Yeah.
got it. That makes such a
It
difference.
does.
Um,
You remember it.
you remember it, you think, oh, that's someone who's proactive.
Yeah.
And
We have an
I will
adage.
try my best to always interview that person.
Yeah,
It
we have an
reflects-
adage in recruitment that's the good people call. And it's like, it's true so often, you know, like people call me and they say, "David, look, I just want to let you know, I just applied for that job.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in it." They'll call me again when the role closes, "Just want you to know I'm still interested in the role." And then when we sit down, Dean and I sit down and review CVs, I'll say like, "Oh no, look, yeah, that
Yeah,
guy called me.
exactly.
That guy called me.
Yeah.
He's really interested in it." Or that lady mentioned she's interested in the role, blah, 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 blah. And it
Makes
works.
a difference, it does
Yeah.
work. You rang me, didn't you? Yep.
There you go, the good people.
But
But I do wish you all really well on your job search. It will be challenging, but it's not insurmountable. And you've got really cool opportunities and you've got some really good support in front of you in the Careers Development Centre. But I'd also invite you, like, if you see any roles here at the university that you're interested in, reach out to me. Give me a call, send me an email. We can have like a korero about the position. I could probably give you like a really good indication about how likely it is that you'll get that role, because I can see all the applicants. And further to the services from Jackie's area, like I can help you with your LinkedIn or your CV or your cover letter if you just want like another set of eyes on it. It's like with children. I was saying this to Dean earlier. It takes a village. Your careers are no different. Like it takes a lot of people, and our success is built on the backs of the people that have supported us. So don't be afraid to stand on a few backs on your way up.
Because you'll help people once you're a bit further up yourself. I remember this phrase and it stuck with me. I went to a women in leadership training, the one that the university runs. And one of the things that somebody said, and I remembered this, and you'll all do this, is don't forget to send the elevator back down for the people who are coming behind you. And that's exactly what we're talking about, really. You know, we'll help people out. So I think we are going to draw this to a bit of a close because it is getting late and we promised you, you know, between 7:30 and 8 we would finish. And I'm conscious you've got lives to lead that aren't in these four walls.